What's good, y'all? Welcome to the Culture Shift with Raven50mm, where we are reimagining podcasting by leveraging blockchain and emerging technology to experiment with monetization and distribution methods. It's Women's History Month. Shout out to all the incredible women out there, all of the grandmothers and mothers, sisters and aunts, and all of the women impacting their circle of love. We recognize you, we honor you, we lift you up in this moment. This month, we will be highlighting some brilliant ladies and creating a space for them to share their story, brought to you by the Legacy Portrait Project and 50mm Collective. The 50mm Collective is a community of BIPOC, trans, and queer digital artists and allies that work together as we pioneer the digital renaissance that's currently happening right now. The 50mm Collective has a YouTube channel with helpful tutorials on how to get set up and get started with archiving your digital artwork on the blockchain. Have you ever been asked, what's your story? That was a question for me when I began my artist journey. And I had never thought of it before up until that point, but as I began to open up and share more of my story, so many things started to unfold. Something special starts to happen when you're invited to share your story and breathe life into a higher version of yourself. The Legacy Portrait Project is a mission-based endeavor aimed at empowering marginalized communities by creating a space to share their story of who they are becoming. Legacy portraits are AR-activated photographs that come to life with video narration sharing the subject's story from their perspective. Think portrait meets mini documentary. Really cool stuff and an innovative way to expand storytelling. All right, so now let me introduce our special guest that we have today. I'm so excited. This is another family affair. Sheila Darcy is a visionary artist and the founder of Sketch Poetic, a creative expression practice that empowers individuals to express, reflect, and heal. In 2021, she authored the book Sketch by Sketch, A Creative Path to Emotional Healing and Transformation, which has since been translated into 8 different languages. Standing at the intersection of art, tech, and wellness, Sheila is a pioneer dedicated to promoting arts and healing. She collaborates with organizations that seek innovative approaches to address holistic healing, encompassing mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. Her expertise has been sought after by notable brands including Google, Disney, Toyota, Sony, and Nike, just to name a few. I am honored to welcome our special guest today, Sheila Darcy. Sheila, how are you? How you living? How you feeling? Thank you for
Hey,
joining us.
oh my God, talk about vibe check. That felt so good. I mean, it's always funny to listen to the superlative intro, but I will just say I'm just happy to be here with you, Raven. You and I have go way back, and it just feels like I'm having a conversation with a really good friend. So I'm happy to be here.
I would plus one that because it honestly, anytime we have a conversation, it's just like I feel like I learn a little bit, I grow a little bit, and it's really beautiful. So I'm excited to have this conversation for other people to be able to take part of now and listen to. So I'm going to get right into the questions here. What sparked your creative journey initially, Sheila?
The short version, mental health. The longer version is my lack of awareness that I even had a mental health issue. So it really is a fascinating journey culturally. I grew up in a Filipino environment and we just never talked about mental health, and it's such a universal theme across many cultures. And we just never talked about our emotions. We were very expressive. We're in a very expressive culture, but it doesn't mean we feel the emotions that we're feeling. And I grew up with a lot of traumatic experiences, but I pushed them all down to survive. And then, when you look at the world and you see what people deem as successful, you strive for that. So I basically carved a path and went down a path that was focused on ambition, performance, achievement, and also not only because I wanted to prove myself to society, but I wanted to make my mom proud, my family proud, right? And that was a big driver for me. And so, yeah, I actually was always as a young kid, Raven, I loved to draw. But I think as I got older and art, and it's such a great metaphor, art became more about what people thought. It had to be perfect. All of the things that cause people to push their creativity aside. I ended up focusing more on business. And in the business world, a lot of things that they herald as values aren't the things that are necessarily healthy for you, like profit and always about the next thing. And so basically, yeah, I got burnt out about 8 years ago. I was at the peak of my career. I was a managing director of an agency. So I got to everything. I got to the place I always wanted to be, Raven. But inside, I was a wreck. I was not mindful, had a lot of physical like anxieties, like my gut was off, and I just wasn't present. And ironically, I didn't go to address my um, anxiety. I went to address my fear of flying. So yeah, I know a lot of people don't know that, but as part of my job, I had to travel to grow the business. But my fear of flying got really bad to where I'd have to get drunk to get on a plane, and I would drink the entire flight and then end up throwing up because I got so drunk. And that's a part of my story that I'm open about because I have a lot of empathy for people that have addiction or use things to numb themselves. So that's kind of the thing. And anyway, the short part of that is that when I decided to address my fear of flying, the therapist that I was seeing asked me if I had a safe, like a safe way to express my emotions. And I said, as a kid, I used to draw. And that was kind of the genesis and catalyst to Sketch Poetic, which is the brand and the methodology. And basically, when I left that therapist's office, Raven, I said, oh my gosh, I want to try doing this every day, but I knew I couldn't do it in the job that I was in. So I committed to leaving that job. It took me 6 months to leave because I was in a high position. So I wanted to make sure I was leaving it in a good place. And then I committed to going to this coffee shop every day before I went to this new job. And it changed my life. So that's what led me to Sketch Poetic.
Wow, that is incredible. I didn't know that backstory of.
Yeah, most people don't.
Thank you for sharing that. You had mentioned enjoying drawing as a kid, and I'm
Yeah.
curious on like what kinds of things did you enjoy drawing when you were a kid, and how has that progressed into your practice now?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that because it's one of the things that I find the most fascinating about my journey. So when I was a kid, I had to draw things that I saw, one, and they had to look exactly like the way I saw it. So I was such a perfectionist, and photorealistic was my ultimate goal. Like I wanted to draw it in a way that you thought it was a photo. And I think that's a metaphor for where I was, right? I really felt like it needed to be exactly how I saw it. And so it was such a control thing. So the other thing is when I drew as a kid, I did it to disconnect, like to escape my life because it was so tumultuous. So it was, and I don't think I knew it when back in the day when you're a kid. Because when you're a kid, you just do it for the sake of doing it. You don't overanalyze any of it, but you realize in hindsight that I did it to escape. When I drew, I just imagined and I just kind of disconnected from myself. So the difference between then and now is two things. One, I don't sketch what I see. I sketch my emotions and how I'm feeling, which is very abstract. It's very surrealist in its expression because I'm not obsessing about what the outcome is. I'm focused solely on the process of purging what's inside of me out. And so that was a huge leap for me to not worry about what it looked like. And that's part of the healing. And then the other part of it is I didn't do it to disconnect. I did it to connect back to me. I had to find me, and one of the things I talk about, I told you in my past, I was in agencies and an executive in agencies, and we'd have to work with brands. And we always talk about transformation, right? Transformation is a very popular word in the world. But for me, my definition of transformation is remembering who I've always been, going back to that. And it's a different type of transformation. It's the shedding, it's the getting rid of all the deep conditioning, the systems, the cultural beliefs, what society has told us. And that is a lot of work. But I do that through my sketching. I unpack it all and I give it permission to be seen. So I'm giving myself permission to actually see for the first time all the stuff that was within me that I didn't want to see.
Wow, that is so powerful and really beautiful. Um, Jeez. So what kinds of as your process and practice has progressed, have you seen a difference in the sorts of sketches that you create as you're processing through your emotions?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah. I
speak to
mean,
that a little bit?
I get chills thinking about it. Honestly, One of the things when I do my daily sketching, Raven, is I'm very present, but I oftentimes don't reflect on the journey. So even though I'm very present, I sometimes these conversations, and that's the reason I get chills, is it makes me think about like, oh my God, at once it feels like a short journey, but at once it feels like a lifetime. But yeah, if you looked at my very first sketch, it really was to get rid of my anxiety. So it looked like this. It looked like scribbles and doodles. You look at it now, and by the way, I'm celebrating my 7-year anniversary, April 19th, of daily sketching. It's huge. Every day for 7 years, I've been sketching. And if you look at it today, it would be intimidating for somebody to jump into the practice looking at my art now, because now it's so detailed and very clear. There's so much clarity in my sketching. So it's not as, it feels like it's not as raw as it was when I first started, because the rawness was real when I first started. Like, talk about vulnerable. You're like putting yourself out there, and I was doing it at a coffee shop, which is really funny, right? And I'm doing this in a public setting, which is all part of my story. Because one of the reasons I think it was very healing for me is I was able to get present in a coffee shop, and I noticed that when I would look up every now and then, I get in flow, I would see people looking at me, not necessarily at sketch. They're like, I could see they were enthralled to whatever it was I was in, like this energy field of like, what is going on? And that was the healing field. It's like, clearly it was somebody that was creating for the sake of something deeper and bigger. It wasn't, because I've been to coffee shops and I've seen people draw, and I think I'm more interested in the drawing than I am the person. And what I noticed was the opposite. People were more enthralled with what is going on with her. Like, they were fascinated because I was in a place where I was in awe. I was like,
Right.
what the hell is going on? And so, yeah, as I've evolved in my healing journey, it is a byproduct from my sketches to have evolved, because it's part of, and even though I've been using pen and paper this entire time, I guarantee it, if you had done a time lapse from day one to where I am, you would see the marks feel different. The way that they're put on paper is different. I also experiment with coffee and painting and color and shells, and I'm very experimental and playful. I just play more a lot. Like, if I could, I would just play all the time and I'd be naked. The truth, Sheila, is just let's just take everything off and just have fun. Like, that would be the true essence of me. Most people wouldn't know that about me, though, because I think the veneer is like, oh, she's so put together. I'm like, no, really, I'd rather just be naked in the desert and just create.
That is very two contrasting things, as you have like your power blazer on, and like
I know, exactly. I know, it's so funny. It's
I love
true,
it
though.
though. I love it. You briefly touched on or spoke on adding coffee and color to your work. Can you speak a little bit about that process, and like what kind of mediums you're using to like add the color, and then also, what inspires that,
Yeah.
a single ink sketch versus, okay, in this one I'm feeling like I'm going to add color. Like what kind of this
Yeah.
determines that for you in your process?
The answer is the feeling, first of all. It's always the feeling. Always the feeling. The coffee was actually an interesting story. At the coffee shop, I was sketching, and somebody accidentally bumped my table, and the coffee spilled in my sketch. That's how that came to be. So to me, that was a divine intervention. And I was just enthralled with the idea that accidents happen, and if we can create beauty from those accidents, how beautiful that story is and that message. So that's the way I think, Raven, and you and I share this, is that we really do come from a place of positivity, but not from a place of Pollyanna, like everything's got to be good all the time. I could walk the path of constant negativity, and there's a lot to be negative about. But I do try to see. So when that accident happened, I could have been like, damn it, coffee in my sketch. But I didn't. I genuinely thought that was meant to happen. And what am I supposed to do with that? So the coffee, and so ever since that, my coffee and ink sketches actually hold a lot of special meaning, and the energy of it feels very different for me. It's almost like I was meant to play with coffee. Then the first medium of color I played with was with watercolor, and I chose watercolor because it's hard to control. it's really hard to control, especially if you're doing it in the way I do it, which is more surreal and abstract. If I were doing it to try to paint a flower, I would be much more controlled. But I really was just playing. And so I just wanted to use something that was more in alignment with the healing journey, like at the underscoring everything I do, Raven, and you know this, it's about arts and healing. And yes, while I'm walking the path as an artist, I'm still Sheila that feels driven to tell the story of how powerful art can heal. Like I never would have thought that I could be who I am today had it not been for my art. And like you said, there's two sides to me. There's the Sheila that has existed in the corporate space for so long, and then there's the Sheila that truly feels the most, I'd say, whole when I remove all the veneer of what it is that I've held myself back from believing in myself because people have told me that's what I should believe, right? That's what I meant by naked. It's not just being naked for the sake of physical nudity. It's naked in the spiritual way, naked in an emotional way, naked in a mental way. Just so out there and so open that there's nothing to hide. And interestingly, when you don't hide things, either people opt out. That's been one of my most profound healing insights is that, you know, for a long time I avoided conflict. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And if, you know, a relationship runs its course, it runs its course. But I noticed when I was walking the path of healing, people just opt out. They're like, I don't want, you know, this isn't my vibe. This isn't my energy. And I'm like, great. I don't have to confront anyone anymore. It's great. So anyway, yeah, it's been fascinating. But color is just a metaphor. It's just an expansion of the play, an expansion of seeing the world differently. But I'll always be a huge passion in black and white because it forces me to actually see the world in the shadow and light the way I see it, and that I can sit in the wholeness of both.
Awesome. I love that. Can you share a little bit about the book that you published and how that came about and just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the book came about also another divine guidance. I will say that a lot when I say I'm divinely guided. I'm not afraid to say that because I know people have a certain, resistance or affinity to divinity. But what I mean by that is when I surrender to the process, I know something bigger is at play. And this book was another great example of it. So probably months into it, like 3 months into my daily sketching practice, I remember having a very innocent moment at the coffee shop, Raven. I was breathing steady. I was relaxed and I was still and I was silent. And I went, do people know art heals? I was like, do people know art heals? And then because I came from business world and I was a facilitator, I did a ton of workshops for my work. I thought, I want to teach people what I do, what I'm doing, without knowing really what it was that I was teaching. But because I came from that background, I was able to deconstruct it. So I did workshops before COVID, like actual in-person workshops at my house, and then COVID hit. And then I did them via Zoom, which was great because it opened me up to a global audience. But in that moment, that 3 months in when I started sketching, I'm like, how do I scale this and do this? And then I got this Instagram message from a wife of a former coworker. Her name is Rachel. She's the other writer in my book, but she was supporting me. She comes from more of a teaching background. Mm-hmm. So she helped me create the scaffolding of the book. But she reached out to me and said, Sheila, I have been watching your journey on Instagram, and I want you to know you've changed my life because I've been watercoloring again, and I've been going through a nasty divorce. Like it's helping her. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow. And she said, if you ever want to write a book, I'm there for you. And because I listened, I heard beyond what she said. I literally had just thought, like, how do I scale? And then within days, she reaches out. So I said, yes, let's do it. So she helped me. And then I got an incredible publisher. That was an interesting journey of being an author. But the one beautiful thing that I will share is one of the inspirations of my book is The Artist's Way, which is a very famous book by Julia Cameron. Mm. And when I got a literary agent, she asked me who my dream editor and publisher were. And this is how naive I was. I said, I don't really know editors and publishers that much, but I would love to have the same editor and publisher of The Artist's Way. And that's who I got.
Wow.
Like serious. And anybody that knows how hard it is to get into a big, like I've been published by Macmillan, Hay House, and Penguin. I don't say that as a bragging right. I'm just showing you how divine my path is. Like a first time author, I just trust that
Yes.
everything is meant to be. And it always does. I'm so patient and I'm so trusting. And those are the two words that are so resistant to being versus doing. I was a doer my entire life. I am now just being who I am, and everything just falls into place when it's meant to come into play.
Yes.
I love it. Like I love everything about it. I know you're geeking out because I see it manifesting and expressing in you. I see it every day when I watch you from the sidelines, Raven. And sometimes not in the sidelines in front of you, but I will say I'm a huge fan of yours. I love your evolution because you're the embodiment of what I believe.
Wow. That. Oh, thank you. Yeah, and that is exactly why I'm geeking out, because I'm like new in this, in what you're
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah.
And South by Southwest this past trip was honestly like such a beautiful, just that divine guidance of just like,
Yeah.
and it brings a lot of peace, like as a
Mm.
creative and as an artist in this career of like every day is just kind of you're trying to figure it out and like hoping that you can make this sustainable and last. And when you just, like you had said, surrender to the process and just kind
Yeah.
of, instead of trying to do everything, you're just existing and looking and listening rather than trying to figure everything out for yourself. It just, like you said, things just start just literally
Yeah.
falling into place. And wow. Can you speak
Yeah.
can you speak a little bit about, like, I know how I get into into alignment to be able to like receive those kinds of, I call them divine downloads,
Yeah.
as I'm
Yeah.
like trying to figure things out. Can you speak a little bit about how you go about surrendering to the process and getting in that posture to just um, remain open to the divine guidance?
Yeah, you kind of led me to the answer. In what you said was looking and listening. I'm going to give you a different nuance to what you said, though, to
Mm,
answer your question about how do I surrender to the process. I would describe my process as witnessing and listening.
mm,
When you're a witness to something, you take yourself out of the equation and you look at things as if they're happening for you and not to you.
I like that.
And when I first started sketching, I'll give you a great example. I was terrible at meditating. I tried meditating. I think I've tried meditating my entire life, but it just never stuck because my mind, I mean, I thought I had ADHD, and I'm not saying that because I know I take it seriously that people have that, but I genuinely didn't know if I did because I had a hard time focusing, multitasking all the time. And I know I don't because now I can be very present, but what I was experiencing is somebody that had a hard time quieting their mind. What I was experiencing was somebody that had a hard time being still and silent. And I mistook that as somebody that had potential ADHD. It wasn't that. I was running away and not listening and not witnessing what was happening. I was so caught up in the noise of it all. I was so caught up in the freneticism of life. And so, yeah, when I'm sketching, I'm able to, and there's a book called Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. He touches upon this idea of the soul versus the spirit. And your soul is really the thing that sits above it all, that is literally observing everything. And if you can tap into that, and one of the things I would like to say, Raven, because I always love to clarify this, the word healing, I say healing a lot. And depending on who you're talking to, again, resistance. Healing is woo woo, healing is this. My
Mm.
definition of healing is actually not woo woo. My definition of healing, in the sense of what I do, is when your subconscious and unconscious becomes conscious.
Ooh, I like
Which is a
that.
very scientific definition, right? And so when I'm sketching, what happens is there's a current. So this is going back to the whole I'm frenetic and chaotic. In the past, when I try to meditate, I would try to push all those thoughts away or trying to quiet. I was like, God, be quiet, be quiet. And you're like getting so frustrated. But when I sketched, they did the opposite. I was witnessing the current, and then suddenly a dress would show up, or my grocery list would show up, or I got to call my mom, or man, I'm so sad. And all those thoughts come through. The difference now is, as I'm witnessing those thoughts, I ask with curiosity, which is the key. If you want to know what it is, the key emotion that I process when I'm doing the surrendering to the process is curiosity.
Mm.
So when I see a dress, I go, that's curious. Why did I see that dress? Or why am I sad today? There's nothing. And in my mind, I'm going, there's nothing to be sad about, Sheila. You got a great life. And so curiosity and witnessing it truly is what surrendering to the process is, because you're in the moment. Not to mistake it with overanalyzing.
Mm.
Other unique part of Sketch Poetic that makes my book unique to other creative expression books that are out there is I actually, all my prompts, there's 40 prompts in my book,
Okay.
all of them are connecting to your body. Every single one, whether it's through breath, or I have you stand up, or I have you notice your hands and how the grip of the pen. My entire purpose is to get you into your body, because that is
Mm.
part that is the intuitive tool that we have neglected. We think of intuition as the third eye, or intuition as our gut, but we forget that our entire body is an intuitive tool. It's always telling us something. We just don't
Something.
listen. Yeah. Even when we meet people, this is what you and I were talking about before we started this, is that discernment. Your body discerns before your mind does. It's interesting. It's pretty powerful, actually, if you can tune into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary. Discernment.
Especially in the world today. Especially in the world today.
Absolutely. When things are just, it's everything seems so fast.
And
In
divisive. We are in a very fragmented, divided world right now, more than I've ever experienced it in my lifetime. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad or good thing. It just is what it is. But if somebody is in the extreme of any division, their energy is equally not as positive to experience as somebody that, because it's just hard. It's just a hard world to traverse right now, because we, as somebody that talks about peace a lot and healing, those words are pretty tricky right now. If you want to know the political climate and the global climate, the word peace is very, it's very complex, and who would have thought the word peace would have ever been a complex topic, but it is now. So I'm just sharing that as an aside, because that's why I'm always in the feeling part. It's not words. It's just our bodies, it's energy that we're experiencing. So we're not talking, we're just experiencing.
Absolutely. The next question I have for you is, what is something that you are currently excited about? What's something that's bringing you joy currently?
A lot, a lot. First
Please
of all, a
share.
lot. Yeah. I have, well, because I know that life is transient and not everything is permanent. So when I say I'm feeling a tremendous amount of joy, I haven't for a long time in this way that I'm feeling it. So I'm embracing it all, and I feel like I'm in a joy minefield right now. It's like everything is so joyful. So I'm excited about a few things. One, I'm finding my voice as an artist, and so that's why I'm doing larger pieces and expressing myself. So I did a huge canvas and finished that, and I'm working on another big canvas. I haven't really shown it, but it's because I'm doing it for myself. If it gets into a show, great. But if it doesn't, that's okay. I'm also excited, again, as part of finding my voice, is and this is alpha. I'm really
Oh
excited
yeah.
to
Oh
share.
yeah.
It happened yesterday, but I got invited to speak at the International Consciousness Forum, which is people traveling all around the world and coming to Madison to talk about the topic of consciousness. And there's scientists and academics and psychologists, and they're just now introducing artists in the last few years, and I'm one of the artists that gets to talk about what I do. And that's huge for me, right? Because now I can talk about, I just really believe artists are going to, we're already activists in many ways, but if we can become activists in spaces where usually artists aren't invited to, like artists aren't usually invited to academic spaces. Artists aren't always invited to spaces of science, but I seem to have bridged some of that. And that's my goal, is let me bridge more artists in this world, because we're doing, Raven, when you create, right? When you're doing these documentary styles and the legacy portraits, you're using your brain as neuroscience, right? You're also using academic thought, because you're like geeking out on the technicalities of everything. Artists have such complex understanding of these things. They just don't have the language to speak about it, right? But it's there. And so I think that's why when I look at my life, this is about my story, right? I go, why is somebody like me that came from the business world for as long as I did now standing in the position of art, tech, and wellness? It's because I can speak that language. I can talk to executives. I can talk to
Wow.
brands, you know?
Wow.
And I was meant to bridge. I'm a bridge builder, and that is my goal. Is I'm supposed to bridge these worlds that artists would normally probably feel intimidated by. And I used to feel intimidated by going into the art world. Like when I first went into Web3, that was the first space where I felt so welcomed as an artist. Truly, you know, because galleries, right? All the gatekeepers you have in the traditional art world. No, Web3. That's why I always have a love. I will always have a love for Web3. No matter how much people poo-poo on NFTs and Web3, I have only met people like you, and the collective creators have been so welcoming and so warm. Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited about those two things for sure. Playing bigger and then being able to speak about the importance of what we do as artists and how we heal the world through it. We can heal the world through what we do.
That is congratulations. Like what?
Thank
That
you.
is
Yeah,
massive. See, I didn't want to like interrupt because we're recording a podcast and stuff, but I was
no,
like
it's fine.
it like come
Oh, shout away because it's you. Thank you. It's you. It's a big deal. Yeah,
come on. What that and wow, that is first of all, yeah, major congratulations. You deserve like
thank you.
totally you are I could not think of a better person. And I really like what you touched on there of like it's a little bit trickier for artists to be able to articulate what we're trying to express or why we think our art is important, and that's why we make the art, because that's like that is how we process and kind of that's our way of articulating the significance. So I appreciate that acknowledgement because it is that's something that I find myself battling with. Like, oh, I have to write a description for this piece, and it's like, just
ChatGPT. Use ChatGPT.
That's been the game changer because
it
like
has for me too. And I'm a writer. I love ChatGPT for that reason. It can be helpful if you're using it for your own benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah.
But I wanted to touch on something here because it makes me laugh because the way artists talk about the intimidation of storytelling, marketing, the business of art, right? There's so much intimidation and fear around it. I'm laughing because like I said, I've been in the business world for so long. The way that we talk about art is the way that they feel it. Like it's literally funny when I talk to business people and corporate people and they think about art. It's like, oh my God, it terrifies them. It's just funny because it's no matter what side you sit, there's a terror on the other side of all of it. And so if I could just show that it's really not as terrifying as you think to be an artist. You can be a rock star executive, you can be a rock star doctor, you can be a rock star lawyer, but you can still create and play the guitar and dance and sing. But for some reason, the proposition of that is terrifying for a lot of people. So just know that it sits on both sides. The terror is on both sides. I find it very comical, but that's what we're supposed to do is help show people it's not that scary.
Mm-hmm.
Especially storytelling. A lot of people are very uncomfortable telling their stories.
Yeah, I have a thought on that.
I'd love to hear it. Why don't you share?
I think, and I can only speak from my personal experience. Like for me, coming into Web3 and going into Clubhouse rooms and things like that, that was really the first time I had been asked, like, what's your story?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I've never been asked that, and now I have to really like think about that. And just having this space I think people are afraid to share their stories because they haven't before, and that's like a new thing. And like I remember I would type it out in a note, my story, like how like my own story. I'm typing out a note to read because I would get so nervous that I would black out and not remember like what I said or what I was reading so I would literally read it, but having that space to just have the time to share and speak on who I was and things that I've gone through and share my testimony, that like
Yes, I love that word, your testimony. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, it really like shifted. It built a lot of confidence within me, because things that I was sharing I hadn't shared before, and but I had overcome them, but I wasn't sharing them because it was like I don't know if it was like shame or if it was more of um like it wasn't that big of a deal kind of thing, but like it
Yeah, no, yeah. I have a thought around this that may be a good reflection for you, because I'd be curious if you felt this shift. This is the shift that happened to me, of
Mhm.
why I'm able to tell my story now and I couldn't before. By the way, I used to be terrified of public speaking or any sort of speaking. I would be, interestingly, I was successful in the business world, but anytime I have to pitch work, I would get the worst stomach ache, and I practically almost threw up before that. I mean, I was terrible. I hated speaking. Now I can speak, and I mean, I'm sure I'd still be uncomfortable in a big stage, but my point is I'm comfortable, and this is the reason. When I didn't know who I was and I hadn't walked this path of healing and spirituality, when somebody asked me what my story was, it was more like a timeline description. This is what happened. Beats. This is what happened. It wasn't really a story. It was just like a mementos of events. Now, when I talk about my story, I do it for two reasons: to connect and to inspire.
Mm.
And in the past, I think those two weren't the reasons I would share my story. I was so caught up in, what do I say that's going to be important and matter in the world? What do I say that is going to make the audience be engaged? What do I say that, is going to be meaningful? So it was always with the other person or the audience in mind.
Mm.
But when you walk a path of healing and spirituality and joy, which is what I've been feeling lately, you really do share your story for one reason alone. You hope that somebody out there connects and feels inspired to action, to change, because they need to hear it. And if I can reach one person, then I've done my job. That's truly the way I go into any of these things, whether it's a podcast or an interview or my art. My art is that every day I share my art because it's my story. And that's why I started doing those voiceovers over my reel. Is
Mm.
it dawned on me, if technology is forcing me to do reels now, first of all, because you have to use reels to even be seen anymore, how do I use that thing that's been forced upon me to connect? I always
Mm.
come from a point of connection, Raven. Always. Always. Because when you're living a life of purpose, as you know, it's all about that. That's how you change people's lives. And that's how you change the world, is to connect and get people to connect back with themselves, you know?
Yes, yes, that
Yeah.
part too.
Yeah.
And realize, how worthy and valuable each individual person is. In
Every person
yeah,
has a story to tell. Every
yes,
person's story should be told. Yeah.
yeah, beautiful. I just have a couple more questions here for you, Sheila, and we will start to wrap it up here. It's always a great conversation with you. I can't even front, like always, just a great time.
Yeah, same. I feel the same. Thank you for receiving it in that way. I always feel in flow with the right people. I feel very much in flow at this moment. Like I get lost in the whatever this is we're doing. I just get caught up in the exchange in which we're experiencing. So thank you.
Hmm. Um, what does culture mean to you, Sheila?
Ooh, it's a great question. As somebody that lived in corporate culture for so long, I know what it's not.
Mm.
Culture isn't forcing people to believe and align with a set of values that aren't in alignment with them.
Mm.
So the opposite answer is, what is culture to me? Is when a collective can come together to share a set of beliefs and values that are intrinsic and genuine and authentic to them. When we can get to a culture, and this is Web3 as well. I'm going to go back to Web3. Web3 is a fascinating study of culture to me. It's a fragmented society of people, or a fragmented collective of people trying to find their people, truly, like in many ways. And so we have these mini cultures, right? But at the core, and this is what I would like to believe, and maybe this is the hopeful Sheila that will continue to exist and help be present in the space for this reason. The hopeful part of me is when we all, from Clubhouse days to Twitter, we all came into Web3 and NFTs with this idea of creative sovereignty and creative ownership. Like this idea that we as creators, it makes me emotional. I don't know why I just got really emotional, but I'm just going to let it be. But I think as creators, as somebody that's a new artist, I think we've always seen a path that's just full of gates and full of like walls of gatekeepers and people saying you're not good enough. And it has to be this to get in a gallery, or you have to look a certain way. And only, you know, I just watched the Frida Kahlo documentary, and she was fighting the fight as a woman. You know, it was always men in the art world, and it continues to be in many cases. But I'm sharing this because going back to the culture for me is as much a expression of values and beliefs as it is an expression of desire and hope for the future. And if we can, and Web3, remember that the intention of why we even joined the space was around creative sovereignty and creative ownership and community and connection. And that's the culture to me. It's that desire, that intention, that vision. And you see cultures go sideways because they leave the culture to a subset of people to define it, you know, in the world. And that's where we get it messed up and wrong, is that not only do we let a subset of people define the culture, but then we align our values and beliefs to them. And that's what I saw in corporate America. When I say to you, I know what culture is not, is we used to joke that we drank the Kool-Aid. We drank the Kool-Aid, and you fit in and you played the part. But you did it because you wanted to belong. You didn't do it because you felt in alignment with the values.
Okay. You know? Yeah.
You know, don't mistake belonging, a desire to belong, culture. It's so not the case. Like I said, sometimes it's easier to know what something isn't than it is to know what it is. And culture is not belonging. Belonging is, you're the only person that can feel the belonging. You know, I could give you all the reasons, Raven, that, like you told me about South by Southwest and the way you talked about the boys club, right? Is
yep.
The name of it? That their culture was so inviting, so warm. You felt it like you belonged.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was my first event.
But if you did not have that sense of self, there's nothing, no invitation, no warmth that could have made you feel belonging. So it's a two-way conversation. Culture is a two-way conversation. It has to be, in order for it to fully express what we want it to be. So I'm so passionate about this topic, so I'm glad you asked about it.
That was there's so many gems in what you just said, like so many just nuggets. I'm taking a timestamp note because I want to I'm going to go back and listen.
Again, source. Awesome. We're in flow. That's what happens.
I love it. Okay, 2 more questions for you here, Sheila, and then we'll wrap it up here. How do you define legacy?
Oh, look at you, Raven, dropping these profound questions. Oh, wow. This is a good one. How do I define legacy? I can only answer it for me because I wrestle with this a lot. One of the ways that I found liberation and freedom is when I remember, I don't even know the date what it was, Raven, but I remember when I started walking this purpose-driven path, this spiritual path. And I had this knowing that my impact is going to, my deep, true impact. So I already know I can create impact in this world today. But my true impact, the reason my soul came into this world and is here and is doing the Sheila Darcy Sketch Poetic thing, my true impact will not be felt in my lifetime. Meaning, I won't see it while I'm here. It liberated the crap out of me. Because as somebody that was so ambitious and so driven my entire life, when I took the goalpost and the finish line off the path, I was like, oh, I could just be every day Sheila. And as I create impact, I just know the real impact I'm going to make, I won't be in this lifetime. So that's legacy for me. Legacy is not being beholden to a time frame, beholden to a measure of success that I've somehow grabbed in my head that that's what it is. legacy, and Maya Angelou said it best. It's the way we make others feel. It's truly, truly the best legacy, because it's what people remember. People
Mm-hmm.
don't remember that famous quote. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you do, but they will always remember how you feel. I might have butchered that
Yes.
quote, but it's the same idea. So legacy for me is not measured by time or by some sort of measure of success. Legacy is a state of being and knowing that it transcends all of that.
Mm. Powerful, powerful. And the last question I have for you, Sheila, what do you want your legacy to be?
That art heals. It's just that simple, and it will never. It's an immovable object and purpose that I know I was asked and invited and called in to be a part of that movement. I'm one of many people that have been talking about this. For some reason, though, in the way I'm saying it and the way that I've been led to it, I'm able to reach more people because of that bridge building. Like I said, I can talk to people of this world versus this world, and I'm able to somehow language it so that they can connect with it. So my legacy is a bridge builder, and that art heals, and and when I say that, again, I won't see it in my lifetime, but there will be a point in time where the world will give credit to artists and creators for healing the world, because
Mm.
we are doing it every single day in the way we were showing up for ourselves. And so I just want us to be intentional about it. Just be intentional.
Whew, that was good. That you can't see behind these glasses, but that got me a little bit there. Wow. Sheila, thank you so much for just your time, your energy, just the insight that you have provided during this conversation. Like, I know so many people will be blessed by hearing this, and so I just want to
And
thank you. Um,
I just want to say thank you. Like, listen, I've done a number of conversations and interviews, and I woke up with so much excitement and joy to have this one, because when I say I have been watching you and observing you, and I really want you to receive it. You are truly the embodiment of what's good in the world. And I want you to continue this path. You're going to change so many lives that you already have. And I know you've had to make some really difficult decisions to get here, but it's all worth it. It's all worth it, Raven. Like, I have experienced so much in life, and I wouldn't have expected where I am. Now we're both getting teary eyed, because when you feel called and live a life that is so driven by something bigger, there's no greater gift, really. And I see that in you. I'm so, so proud of you and so happy for you.
I got trying to do this outro. Like, oh, woo.
Your outro is I'm out. I'm
Right.
out.
Yeah, let me go. Blow my nose as the outro or something. Oh, goodness. Wow. I received that, and I thank you. Oh, man. Just let me take it.
Yeah, actually, I have water too. Let's drink together.
Oh, man.
But this is it. This is it. If people want to listen and watch and observe us and witness us, this is what they've got to observe: real, meaningful connection.
Truly.
It's just not another interview. It's not just another conversation. It's not another episode in your long list of libraries, Raven. People need to experience these moments as real moments, right? And this is why social media is so damaging. We just flip. So I feel like I had to take a pause and recognize that, we just finished talking for an hour, and I just felt a beautiful connection to you, and I wanted to reflect that back to you.
Thank you so much. I received that. Thank you all so much who tuned in and listened to this episode, especially to everyone who is going to collect this when it hits the blockchain. That is what sets Culture Shift apart, is these episodes are archived on the blockchain. And not only that, but they're also being sold for crypto, and every guest earns a percentage of those sales for being so gracious with their time, energy, and perspective. If you listen to this and are wanting to learn more about crypto art, digital assets, and the blockchain, reach out. Let's connect. There are so many resources, and I would be honored to help you get started on your journey. This is the Culture Shift with Raven50mm. Thank you all again, and we will catch y'all on the next episode. Stay hydrated, stay blessed. Peace.
Peace.